You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying. Well, good evening, everyone. It's Friday here for us, and it's been a Friday, and we are so excited to launch out this movie. So we have hinted at on our page about a little Poe extravaganza, but we're putting that off 1 month because we're doing a movie we love. Not that we don't love Poe movies, but see, it's cold and nasty here in Ohio, even though we had a nice little warm snap. And I've been thinking about nice tropical, hot, warm weather, and Creature from the Black Lagoon came to mind. And then this is the best. It turned out that the release date from Creature from the Black Lagoon is February 12th, 1954. So this month is its 70th year anniversary. Like, how super exciting is that?
I think it's great serendipity of this.
We are accidentally so cool and right on the ball. Look at us go.
Exactly. It's me. It just happened. It's karmic. It's great. So we're excited. And the other thing was I'm reading a book called The Lady from the Black Lagoon, whose author is skipping for a minute. Let me look it up. By Mallory O'Meara. I shouldn't forget her name. She's a very fun person. And it basically talks about Millicent Patrick, who is a designer of this lovely creature suit you see here. I don't think she was the sole designer, but she was one of the main designers on it. And she is the only female who made a iconic Universal monster look. So, like, to this date, no other woman has been given the chance, and have done an iconic monster. And this was of 2018 of the writing of Mallory's book. And it's just, it's a little known fact. She wasn't credited in the film at all. And often a lot of the underlings of the main designer are never credited, but she was also like almost disappeared out of Hollywood. Mostly because the main featured set, or designer was really mad about the recognition she got at the time. So like after she got all this recognition on tours and stuff like that, he basically just kind of shafted her out, and and her name almost got erased, to the point where when you first asked about her and you'd see pictures of this woman, Millicent Patrick, she's stunning. She's absolutely gorgeous. Like, she was also a model and all this other stuff, and she had like background roles as an actress. Um, they would see this picture of her working on it, clearly working on the mask and stuff, and people were like, oh, I'm sure she was just the girlfriend of somebody on set. It's just a lark picture. And so it's important to note that this iconic creature was mainly done by a woman. And Millicent Patrick was also an animator in the early years of Disney. She's one of the first animators there. It's hard to determine whether or not she was the first or just amongst the first. It's really hazy. But she was an animator on Fantasia during the Chunabog scene, the demon,
The one that Lucy was the model for.
One of the models for, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's great stuff. Anyway, I highly recommend the book. I have not made it all the way through yet because I'm been kind of crazed lately. It's an excellent book. It not only tells you about Millicent Patrick, it writes a story about what women go through then and now, especially in a place like Hollywood, and I highly recommend it. And after that lecture, we'll move on to the actual movie.
It's on my reading list, along with 60 billion others.
So I don't know about you guys, but my introduction to Creature from the Black Lagoon, I believe, was from Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, when she did the hosting of the 3D release in TV. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I have loved it from that moment on.
I don't remember when my first viewing of it was, but it might have been 2018 when Gateway Film Center was doing the Universal Monster Movies series, and they had Creature in 3D. So it may have been that, because I can't remember a defining moment previous to that.
I will say, like, the TV release with Elvira was also a big thing at the time because it was in 3D, and you had to like go to the grocery store and get your 3D glasses. It was a whole thing. Betsy, your favorite too, right? Or one of your favorites, right?
It is. It's one of my favorites as well. And honestly, I think I just caught it one time on AMC. Like, literally, it was just a Nothing special, just sometimes AMC would show these, especially around Halloween. They'll show like the Universal monsters. And I'm pretty sure that's when I saw it the first time. I probably stayed up past my bedtime to watch this movie at some point or another. Um, so I can't remember when a time when I hadn't seen it, but also I can't remember the first time I saw it. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
so I had to be
it
young
does.
enough.
I'm kind of sitting in the same way, you know.
I have a memory of trying to get the 3D glasses, and I am trying to look up when this was, but I can't find it. But I feel like it was like sometime in the early 80s that this happened.
Probably.
And I unfortunately not Google is not my friend today about this, but yeah, it was a whole thing. And I also kind of remember reading in her book, Yours Cruelly, Cassandra Peterson's book, where she talks about how like they didn't even give her 3D glasses, so she was in her curlers with her friends going to watch her show premiere with this big premiere of the 3D creature in Black Lagoon, and she had to go to the grocery store and hope nobody recognized her to get 3D glasses because the studio was too cheap to give them to one viewing, which, that's pretty much par for the
Yeah.
course, right? So,
Yeah.
quick plot summary. You have a archaeologist, anthropologist, paleontologist. I'm not sure what they don't really official title, but somebody
Kind of,
who's looking for fossils.
yeah. Kind of paleontologist that I think at least the impression I got was he specified in marine fossils.
Like he was at any rate, yeah, he was a paleontologist. They find this claw. He's super excited because why wouldn't you be, And they take it to he goes and takes it to a local university just to have other people verify what his find is and how important it is, and ends up being like a friend of his that's an ichthyologist that was a student of his, and they hook up with you know them to go on an expedition to try to look for more of the fossils. And of course, the thing is that there is a fossil, but there is actually a live creature, and murder ensues. He kills people at the camp, and then they go further in to try to find because they can't find any more fossils in the area that they had found the claw fossil. So they realize that things could have broken off and gone further downriver to where there's actually a lagoon that bears off, and that would be a good place for them to follow up their research to find more. And they go into the lagoon, and that's when the creature really starts wreaking havoc, shall we say.
The creature reaches the point where he just doesn't give a fuck and goes under. I don't know. He's like, I'm just gonna get rid of everybody.
I think though it
Although,
starts because of course he sees Julie Adams, who's playing Kay, I believe,
yes, correct.
swimming, and because all creatures will, he falls in lust with the beautiful woman, a Beauty and the Beast kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, and Julie Adams is absolutely gorgeous. You can't take that from her.
Nope.
But yeah, and then the killing ensues, after things like that. But this suffers from being a 1950s movie, meaning that like the upside is you have Julie Adams as Kay, who is playing an actual scientist. But
Yes,
they kind of
I did notice that. I was like, and I appreciated it. And I think it's a mark of progress, certainly from the 1930s Universal Monster movies, where they were just spouses and girlfriends, fiancés.
mm, she had a profession. It was great. I think they of course downplayed it, and of course she's more the love interest of the ichthyologist who doesn't quite want to get married, but wants to get married. I don't know. It's like it's a thing. I don't know. But it also like at first she comes off as a nice strong role, and then it degrades into and it makes me nuts by that point. Um, but it is what it is. It's the 50s. She was a scientist. And there is a point where they kind of sort of subtly put in there a commentary, shall we say, of being used. Like there's a little scene where they're talking about David and Kay are talking about their boss, Mark, and and she talks about his contributions or something like that. And David, her love interest, says, "Oh, he's real good at taking credit for finds or contribute." That, and then kind of in the first you don't really think about it, but then later on she has another conversation with another scientist that knows her and works with her, and he says, a lot of where Mark is from taking stuff that you did, is in there. So it's a little subtle commentary that this boss had taken credit for her work, and that's what David was talking about, not his own work being taken credited for, but hers. And I thought that was really interesting. But
I appreciated that commentary.
and I'll have to say, it took me probably to this rewatch to catch that. I don't think I really noticed that before.
Yeah, I caught it on this watch too. I was like, oh, look at that. Like multiple of her colleagues are calling out the fact that someone is getting accolades on her back and that she needs to basically they were saying you need to speak up for yourself more, which I thought was
Well,
really
and
interesting. I was
not
like,
feel guilty and throw him out, like basically she
yeah,
can move on without him because like the conversation had something to do with like she felt like she owed him something. And
yeah,
the one guy was
It
like, "You don't know I'm dick."
reminded me of the whole DNA who really discovered it, the formation or the structure thereabouts. So
Yeah.
or who created the creature costume and who actually took credit for it.
yeah.
I'm just saying, it's kind of ironic that they put that in there and then it literally happened during the filming.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. But I mean, and like we have to go on about this. I love the creature. Like the design of it is gorgeous. I mean, like the scales, the abs, the work, the claws with the webs, and his face is a little goofy to me sometimes, but I'm like, how do you make a Fishman face not look goofy? I don't know.
Yeah. I
Well,
think for the time period, they did a really good job with the creature and all the filming,
yeah.
specifically all the underwater filming.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and the creature was played by two separate actors. So they also had the limitation of this had to be a suit that could fit two different people. So it couldn't really form fit the face because you would think like they could have put it more on the face, but they couldn't because there had to be two different actors under there. So they couldn't 100% form fit the face because they were using
I
it kind
thought
of.
they had two different suits.
I don't know. Like that's up in the air. I didn't never read anywhere that they had more than one suit, but that doesn't mean that they didn't. But I feel like, if this was low enough budget, they wouldn't. You
One
know
of
what
the
I
Yeah.
mean?
commentaries that I read said that the two men shared the suit, but
Uh-huh.
never met until 20 years later at a convention.
That's really cool. But then, of
Yeah.
course, they could have meant shared the suit
Shared the
metaphorically,
suit.
not actually.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because
And this is me assuming a lot, but I feel like the reason that they didn't, because even if they didn't share the suit, even if there were two separate suits, you can't have it fit to a face and have the faces look different if you want continuity.
Sorry, I was just reading a bit of trivia on the same thing. So, Rick Browning was the stuntman who did the underwater shots of the creature, according to this trivia. And it said he had to once make an emergency bathroom stop, so he like was quickly exiting the water. And it said that he had been underwater for several minutes and he breached the water in full costume next to an unsuspecting mother and her young daughter on the nearby shore. And he said that they fled in terror once they saw him, and he called that they took off, and that's the last he saw of them ever. Those poor people. That little girl still, as a little woman, having nightmares about creature.
well,
Good.
I'm not sure I would act any differently, let's be honest.
I'm not judging them at all. I would probably be like, ooh, okay. And Ben Chapman played the creature when it was out of the water with the darker suit. So maybe there was more than one suit. Because it's just
Maybe.
this trivia is mentioning, oh yeah, here we go. Two different stuntmen were used to portray the creature, and therefore two different suits were used in the movie. However, I would like to say this is IMDb trivia, and often it's people who contribute that. So it could also be bullshit. I mean, about the two suits, you just
Right. You just don't know.
We haven't had time to verify the source material.
yes. So back to Millicent Patrick. I know I had said it, but so she created the design of the creature, but it was Bud Westmore who got the credit. He was the head of Universal's makeup department at the time, and so he took credit publicly for the creature's design. He's the one who you will see in the credits,
there's
and
a
is
West
apparently was a horrible prick.
there's a there's a Westmore
We
dynasty. It was the father was a designer. All of his sons were designers. Their sons were designers. So it's a big family of uh designers. So it's not 100% shocking that he would take credit for it because he'd be like, "Oh, well, it was under my tutelage that this happened, probably." So
Yeah. But yeah, like things that I read, like he got really jealous of it too. Was just like, nope,
Well,
you don't
apparently,
exist.
I just read somewhere that they put her on tour with it
Yeah, that's one
they
of the
wanted
parts where
her
he
to
got
be
jealous.
yeah, because they wanted her to be the face because she was so beautiful. This is the beauty behind the beast. And so they sent her on tour with it, and he got super jealous because she was getting all of this publicity for what he considered his work.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, I'm also reading that the creature's appearance was based on an old 17th century woodcuts of two bizarre creatures, the sea monk and the sea bishop, and that the creature's final head was based on that of the sea monk. But the
Well, had to
original
look at that
discarded
up.
head was based on that of the sea bishop.
Yeah, they were there. Those two references were some of the earlier references on mermaids that we at least have visual representation of.
All right. Everyone do yourself a favor. Just look up the sea monk.
Okay, now I'll have to. Sea
I
monk.
know. I already know the
Okay.
illustrations. I saw them years ago
Sorry,
in
it's
a
cute.
Reader's Digest Mysteries of the Unknown something something collection. I don't know.
You love those collections.
Oh
Oh
God,
man.
Every time I ever saw advertisement for them, I was always like, "Can I?" My mother was like, "No."
no, I know, I know.
The
Or
sea
the
bishop is also worth it, but not as good as the sea monk. Just saying. All right,
Ah,
I'm done.
so
Whew. Everybody, look that up and have a good giggle for a minute with us, and then come back. Back into the film.
back into the film.
and
How dare
they
you leave the film? Sorry.
yeah, and I think with the design of the creature, it just became so iconic now because it's been used as inspiration in other films.
Oh,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Well, specifically, I think both Del Toro movies of Hellboy
Hmm.
series. Well, although that he's also taking from the comic, which may have also had, you know, gone back to that, but um, and then the Shape of Water.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which The Shape of Water is kind of a remake of Revenge of the Creature. If you've ever watched it, which at the time I when I watched Shape of Water, I wasn't aware, interestingly, of Revenge of the Creature. And I just kind of thought, oh, this is kind of like an interesting sequel, to Creature
Yeah,
from the Black Lagoon, and didn't realize there already was a sequel. Actually, I think there were two sequels. I don't know what the third one was. Um,
yeah, I've seen Revenge of the Creature. Because I do have it on DVD on my DVD collection. Um, but I didn't watch it until relatively recently.
yeah, I mean, I've seen Revenge of the Creature since, but when Shape of Water came out, I had not. So
Same,
I
same.
discovered that afterwards. I was like, huh, interesting. Okay. But which Revenge of the Creature is kind of fun. It's not great. It's not horrible. Um, it does make a commentary on like, torturing and being cruel to creatures in captivity, which
Yep.
is, pretty
Nice.
neat. Um, but yeah, so the creature thing that is funny, like I don't know what other plot they could have come up with in the 1950s, but basically the plot really did circle around the creature just being obsessed with this woman and then also killing anybody who came into his territory. Which anybody who came into his territory is smart if you want to survive.
I mean, it's pretty classic, this is my space, and other people who are threatening it are not allowed in it.
Hmm.
So,
Well, because then what happens if they do? They try to kill it. You have the Dr. Mark who was the boss, who was kind of a dick. Um, his immediate thing as soon as he catches wind of it is capture it, dead or alive. It's a specimen, where you have the other scientist, the Dr. David, the love interest, who's like, no, we study it in its habitat, we will learn more. Better science for sure.
yes, it is.
I was going to
And
say, and so we know who the better scientist is and who the one that wants to make money on it is.
exactly. And there you have your own conflict: commercial money or actually learning something.
Yeah. I think he got a little bit too stressed about all the grant writing.
Could have been. He probably
Yeah.
wasn't doing the grant writing anyway. Um,
That was what she was doing the whole time.
yeah, yeah, I think that was one of Kay's jobs. He was a promoter, so there's that. But yeah, just the scenery looks gorgeous. It's so funny because the thing that I don't like is the fact that it's black and white. You can't tell. Like they mentioned in the movie, it's supposed to be beautiful, but it doesn't look beautiful in the movie because of the black and white. It looks like swamp. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't
it
really
was
look
a
like a lagoon. It looks like an unpleasant environment.
yeah, and they used the property that they used was privately held and had like purposely been left alone. So it was kind of like a little nature preserve refuge. And so I think that enabled them to get as unspoiled a territory as they could get without actually going, to some remote location. Because they did that part in Florida. And
Nice.
yeah, I too wish because I'm sure it was lovely. I've been to tropical areas and they're beautiful. But I agree, it's hard to get a sense of that in the black and white.
Yeah, it doesn't look um beautiful. I mean, it doesn't look horrible, but it looks like it'd be a little shady. Like, do I want to swim in that? That looks a little murky. But
Although with the underwater shots, which I am really impressed with how good those were. I mean, and this was 1954, so still fairly early. I'm not entirely certain when underwater photography came about, so I can't really say how long it was in play, but I thought they did a great job with that. And you could see at least how clear the water was with those shots. So,
Mhm. Yeah, like anytime it looked murky, it was more because they kicked up debris, which made sense,
yep. Yep.
Um, but yeah, I don't know, the way the creature moved in the water looked amazing. Of course, the stuntman was a diver, a professional diver and swimmer, so one would hope he would be able to move gracefully in the water. But you would think with the suit that would hinder him some, and it comes off really well. And also the scoring. You really have to shout out the scoring because like this movie wouldn't be as exciting without it. But like even like a simple scene where you see his claw come over, onto the shore, and that's all you see, the way they scored it, it really drums up the drama, and you're really like, something
Yeah,
creepy
because
is happening here.
there are so many long sequences where you're not having dialogue because it's all those underwater scenes where the scientists are investigating and you see the creature kind of watching them from a distance or following but not being seen. How are you going to bring about tension and stress when there's no dialogue? That leaves you physical actions and music.
Mhm. And they just did excellent with music, in my opinion. I just thought it was so well done. It wasn't over the top. It was the right amount of suspense,
Hmm.
driving up and not like, okay, really. And every time they did it, it led somewhere. Even if it
Hmm.
wasn't like immediate action, like even if you just saw the hand come over and then come back, because the way they scored it made you get that feel like oh, okay, it's not. Like it was just that well done. Like because the way the music would ooze off, it would be like as if you felt that something was going to happen, and the music would kind of take you back and go, oh, but it's not just yet.
Wait for it.
Yeah, I really loved that. I think that was one of the reasons why this movie actually stays in your head so much, is because it was not so much scary as suspenseful, in my
Yes.
opinion. Like even as a child watching it, I didn't really get scared, but it kept me engaged. You know,
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. No, it's not really going for fear. At least it doesn't feel like a fear response with the music. Oh.
yeah,
Although
and that
honestly,
oh, go ahead.
when Kay was swimming and you see the creature like reach out for her, I'm like, they did great with the music in that part. But my one comment was when she kind of felt him brush against her leg. Look, I've been in the ocean and I felt seawater brush against my leg, and I was up on the raft and like maybe a heartbeat. You're in the Amazon where there's all kinds of predatory creatures that seem worse than what you would encounter in a day at the beach. So,
The
at
very
a beach for
Calm.
many, many people. So
yeah, the very fact that she was just like, I'm just gonna dive into this water after the one guy was like, yes, they call this the Black Lagoon. Like, sir, sir.
Well, and she'd seen like alligators and other things and like,
Yes.
haunting noises. I mean, she was exploring in Brazil, and I think her profession was like underwater botany, maybe the way, because they bring her up a plant at some point, I believe.
Yeah,
So
they
I think
brought her a
that's
plant.
really what her thing was. So you suspect that she spent time in the water in places, and like they
yeah,
met up in Brazil, but you're in the middle of the fucking Amazon here. I
my
agree
toe
with
Not
you.
was touched in that water.
probably at least take a buddy. Like, just don't go by yourself, maybe. I'm just saying.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm fine with her going by herself, but if I felt something that felt like it was trying to tickle my foot, I'm gonna move quickly.
yeah.
Also, don't go in the Amazon in a white bathing suit. It's just not going to work out well for you in the end.
But here's the thing that annoyed
That
me.
thing
So
was
she
so
was
gross.
swimming, and like everybody on the boat's like, "You're too far." She was like 5 feet from the boat. It wasn't like
It was not
they
fun at
start at
all.
the boat to chase after her, like she's swimming in a, and I get it. It's the 50s, but I'm also like, oh, come on. And then there's also another scene where like David comes up and he's like, you should see how beautiful it is down there. And she's like, I want to see. I would love it. And does he say, okay, well, let's hook you up with the aqua lung and let's
Yeah,
go down? No, he says, ah, pat, pat, you know.
And it's pretty obvious like she must have training as well. Like,
yeah. Because she's dealing with the equipment. She's
yeah,
commenting in
she's
the beginning about the how you have to time your going up
right.
Yeah.
to both of
Ascension.
them. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
The word
ascension. Yes.
escaped me.
Well, I was
Yeah,
trying
so
to think
she
of the best word to say. Ascension's all I can come up with. There must be a
no,
rising.
ascension
I
is
don't
good.
know. Yeah, I mean, so I kind of find that irritating. Like they were like, "Well, no, women can't scuba dive." But I love the tanks being called aqua lungs. I don't know why. I found that very exciting. It sounded like a superpower, you know. Bring out the aqua lung.
The aqua lung for Aquaman.
It made me happy. I don't know why, but it did. But yeah, I still say, and the conflict, like the David Mark conflict, where normally you would get like the testosterone flaring would irritate me. It was kind of better done, I guess, because they didn't make
Yes.
it about like I am man and you are man and woman and I am strong. It was more like you're an asshole and I got to work for you, but I'm not going to just.
Yeah,
Right.
it was not their conflict was not over her. Their
Mm-mm.
conflict was let's kill it and bring it back. No, that's dumb. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, you do have Mark being creepy and shady around Kay
Uh,
sometimes, but you didn't feel that David felt like he had to get in there and be like, "That's my woman."
yeah,
So,
there was not really much of that.
though their little fight was hilariously horrible, in my opinion. So, you have Mark throw one punch, and then you have David like, "Ugh." And then he gets up, and then instead of just like hitting him, he like grabs him behind. It almost looked like he was, I don't know, aggressively trying to hit on him at one point because like he grabs him around the waist and sort of picks him up and turns him, and then turns him around to punch him in the face. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. Meanwhile, you have that other poor doctor all bandaged up, like, what the fuck are you
I know.
doing?
And that doctor's just laying there like, I can't even do anything. If you guys touch me, I'm going to go nuts.
Pretty much giving them this look like, what the fuck are you doing?
I am
Yeah.
wounded here. Look at my face.
And like the whole fight didn't even make sense because it was like,
No.
What I did like
it was,
then though was how they had the creature hand come in.
I think that was earlier though, when that wasn't that when Kay was in there and she screams.
Yes.
Maybe,
That was when
maybe
they were
well,
preparing the drug.
he was all there. There was one part where it did where he was all
Yeah,
bandaged
but it was
death.
earlier, I think. No, you're
Yeah,
right. It was the bandage doctor, and he's like, oh,
yeah. I just
but it
don't
was
remember
before
if
the
that was
fight, I
earlier or
believe.
not. I thought it was in the same incident as their little fight, but maybe I was wrong.
It was real close, but
Mhm.
I mean, because like, so they were all around the tank, and they were trying to fill it with they were mixing up the solution that they were going to put in the spray gun
Mhm.
to dose the guy. So it was like
Creature.
right before the fight scene. So they're real close, so you could easily get them tied up together. But yeah,
My comment on the poison, they're just handling it with their bare hands. I'm like, okay, if this does this to the fish, what is it going to do about you?
yeah. And then I'm also thinking when he goes down under with it, like even though they're not breathing it or it's your skin is
Yeah,
exposed, like they weren't wearing wetsuits. And
no.
I'm pretty sure they had them in the 50s because surfers wore them back then too, I believe. But maybe I'm out of my mind. I could be out of my mind. They could have not had them. I don't know. I actually have not looked up the history of scuba diving in
But
wetsuits. I do know surfing was definitely a thing in the 50s.
the boat captain though, he did make me laugh a bit much. Where he's like, But the natives use this thing to fish. I myself before. All I could think of was when my mother found out that my brother and his friend had taken the canoe and gone and had
Dynamite
M80s.
fishing.
Yep, dynamite fishing. And she only found that about, within the past 5 to 10 years.
So
I'm like,
Yeah.
like my family.
So I did a little Googling, and it turns out they did have wetsuits in the 50s. And I can guarantee you why they didn't have them on in this film. Because every time you took it on or put it on, or took it off or put it on, you had to talc the inside, and it could take upward of 30 minutes to put it on and take it off. So for the film to keep going, they could not let them wear wetsuits. It would have taken all the time just to get in and out of the wetsuits.
Makes
There you
sense.
are.
We
That
would
they
lose the
would have
man
to like
candy we
soap
got
up.
to see.
Yeah. So instead, we got to see a whole bunch of 1950s man chest.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wasn't. They looked fairly nice. I'm not mad about it.
They weren't bad. They weren't bad. I've seen far worse than these guys. Although the one time I was like, Mark, your shorts are egregious, sir. Pull them down. Pull them down.
Is it a Speedo? Is it a thong? What are you doing, Mark? He's like, I'm showing my stuff.
Sir, too much thigh. Too much thigh, Mark. Come on.
It's like watching a
Trying to show off his
1980s
manly
basketball
legs.
game. So- but yeah, so I mean, that which is one of the things you could say that you had equality here. I mean, like you actually saw more man flesh than woman flesh, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad about it, but it was funny.
It's definitely funny. It's definitely funny.
Yeah. Okay, so back to Kay. Like I said, you have this scientist and you have some intelligent conversation, then it just literally degrades to every 3 minutes her screaming for David and fainting because of the fish. Even to the point when Mark floats up to the surface and is just bobbing there. This is a woman who can clearly swim and is in fact a scientist. And instead of jumping in the water and trying to save this guy, because she doesn't know how long he's been unconscious, whatever, he could still be alive. She just goes and turns. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Really? That's what we're doing? All right. I get it. It's the 50s. A guy wrote it. I understand. But honestly,
But you
I
could have
mean,
at least given effort.
but I mean, because she could have been like, oh, it's Mark. Fuck that guy anyway. I'll just act like I'm upset.
Maybe that was the case. That's
Which
what
I'll
you
take
get,
that.
fucker, for stealing my research.
Yep. Oh, you died. It's tragic. Um, though give it up for the actress though. I think at one point when the creature is carrying her through the cave, he accidentally whacked her into a wall of it. And I
Yep.
think she was actually unconscious for it as a result. So, you know, which I'm guessing that mask does not give a lot of peripheral vision. So
That's what the was in some of the extra material. He's like, yeah, I can really see that well. So she kind of got whacked against the side, and and apparently they fixed her up and got her, and we're back filming later on. And Ben Chapman, he's like, she was a trooper. She didn't even want Julianne. She didn't even want to do the movie at first. Because as she said, that was back in the days where the studio assigned you movies, and there was none of this. I don't think I want that one. There was you doing these movies, and she's like, oh no, I don't want to be in a horror film. But I think she did a good job.
I think she did amazing. There's nothing against the actress, whatever. And I think she was in films until 2016.
Yeah, well, she
That's
only passed away recently too. I
yeah,
want to say 2019.
2019. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, February 3rd, 2019. So yeah, and she's just a very prolific actress, and lovely. And she
It seemed
sounds
like
like when you read any interview, she sounds super nice and just really.
Good. I felt like she did more TV than movie stuff, but maybe that was just my perception. But yeah,
I
she had a really full career either way. She did a lot of work.
Yeah, I wasn't commenting what it was movies. I just said she was a prolific actress, so I didn't really pay too much. But she had credits going all the way. Yeah, like I said, to
Mhm.
2018
Mhm.
is the last credit she's in for a short.
Mhm.
But yeah, from what IMDb shows, there's a mix.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I mean, she just seems like was funny. Apparently, she actually ended up enjoying the filming of this movie a lot, according to the trivia. So
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I didn't make my way all through the commentary track for this film that I've got, but
yes, excellent buy on your part. I'm very jealous of the Universal Monsters pack. I keep meaning to get one myself, and I just haven't yet.
it's nice.
But
It's worth it. I mean, because they go on and off free channels so often that it's just nice to have a backup.
Yeah. Did I pay $3.49 for this? Yes, I'm not mad about it. It's fine. I'm like, I think I
Exactly.
have it somewhere, but I just didn't feel like digging for it. I was like, you know what? Sometimes it's just worth it. Runt.
now this I find interesting. Apparently, allegedly, Ingmar Bergman watched this film every year on his birthday. So I'm
I
assuming this
found
was
that.
a favorite of his.
Yeah, I found that as well. So
Like, huh, who knew?
Interesting.
Okay.
Hmm.
fun
I mean,
movie.
it's a really solid film. Like, um, there are lots of things about it that I really, really like. Um,
I think for being like a typical like not 1950s monster movie guy in a suit type of thing, it was amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's
With
because the suit moved with the guy. I think, you had less of that stiffness like you see in Frankenstein or even the Wolfman. It was
yeah,
just a lot more fluid moving. So I don't know,
And,
it kind of made it more believable, if that makes any sense.
yeah.
all right. I'm about to say something that's going to sound ridiculous,
Okay.
but he's man enough, like human enough that you kind of feel for him. And he's not so unattractive that you can't be like, maybe he could be good in the right circumstances if these people weren't threatening him.
I I know exactly what you mean, and I know exactly what you're trying to get across, and I would agree.
Which is,
It's the Beauty and the Beast thing going.
it's a Beauty and the Beast thing. It really, really is. Because, and here's where I'm going to say that a woman designed this suit. Because if a man had designed it, it probably would have been more horror, like gross and like like rippy. But the way that they did it, you can see like there's enough expression in it that you're like, oh, this is just an animal. This is just scared. Like you can get enough of that you're like, oh, we don't want to kill it. So that you do feel for it by the end of this, that you're like, well, why do you need it so bad? Why can't you just let it go? You don't have to be here. It lives in this remote place in the middle of nowhere, but you have to do this because of academia and because you have to know. You could just leave it alone. And I think that's part of it, is it really does engender that like care for it. Where some of the monsters, like you said, were a little stiff, were a little, he feels very living and real. And so it's a lot easier to like clue into him a little bit, as opposed to some of the other ones where you're like, this is obviously a man in a suit.
Yeah. Well, our fun-filled one that we watched, The Thing from Another Planet. Yeah. No
Oh,
empathy there whatsoever because it was very plastic. And there's other ones like, so Frankenstein's fairly stiff, but you have an excellent actor there and his facial expressions, Boris Karloff had. So
Yes.
you get the empathy there. Whereas this, you don't have any human looking thing here. But yeah, you're right. Since it's fluid and moving. And I also would say like the dialogue also helped you feel empathy for the creature, where they, often you have Dr. David talking about how, it's a creature, we're in its environment, why, and then you also have Kay, going, most creatures, if you leave it alone, if you don't attack it first, it's not going to attack you. And and the empathy of the other characters plays into your view of the creature.
mhm.
And at first you don't feel a lot of him because he just crawls up on the shore and just flat out murders those two poor guys that were left at
Yeah,
camp to guard it, out of nowhere. But you also kind of get an understanding that it had to do with the fact that they found this fossil, and the creature was protecting his territory.
Yeah.
It just kind of comes into your mind when you get the rest of the setup. But and even like you don't really see him attack anyone until he gets shot at, right? If I recall correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think until he's been spear gunned underwater.
Yeah, that I
Or,
might be
well, yeah,
misremembering
you
because
don't see it, but it is because he goes into the tent and It's that classic, tent shaking, everybody dies, but you're not actually seeing anything.
Mhm.
Although that does have one of my favorite fight things that's ever happened, which is him with that big old glove hand just grabbing that guy's face straight out and pushing him. I was like, yes, if I had that glove hand on, that's the first thing I'd do is be like, "Gah!"
I
You know
appreciate
what?
that they didn't show the full monster so early.
Yeah. But you know what I like later on? So like the first scene where he sort of follows Kay back to the boat and he gets caught in the net. And you still don't really see him, but I mean you see him, but you don't see him fighting in the net or anything. But they pull up the net and they find a claw. I don't know if you noticed later on, but he walks on the deck and you can see there's a claw missing from his foot.
I did not notice that.
I
Continuity.
just
Hell
noticed
yeah,
that
guys.
this rewatch, and I thought, what a wonderful detail. Because they could have just gone with it grew back. It's like like a tail on a lizard. It's fine, it's fine. But
Or
there was
just
a claw
nobody's
missing.
going to notice.
And I love that. I'm like, they took a toe away. That's perfect. But what I hated, and this is a weird thing to get stuck on, but when David is going after Kay, when she gets abducted and taken into the cave, they have this bat fly out of his face. And it was straight out of, Bela Lugosi's Dracula. It was the worst thing. It was so
Out.
awful. It was just,
Yeah.
I'm like, they could have,
It was incongruous with the rest of it. It didn't need to be there.
and it was badly done. Like everything else is done so well. And then you have this horrible looking, like fake, clearly toy bat that is just, and I'm like, I get it. You're like, we're in a cave. We need to have a bat. But did you really? Did you?
Yeah. Was this entirely necessary?
Because it just took me quite out of the moment, and then I was giggling. And then there's also a scene, and this one confused me a little bit. You have David walk across a very shallow seeming pond to get to Kay, who's on the other side, lovely strewed apart across a rock, And then like seconds later, when you just watched him walk across it, and I don't think it went like waist deep on him, you see the creature emerge from that same pond as if he was deeply underwater.
He laid down because he needed to breathe.
There you go.
He was recuperating at the bottom, just like he was having a tea party like he did in the water. I don't why maybe I don't and I also thought it was weird that he would just walk into that David would just walk into that pool anyway. I mean maybe he could see the bottom, but again, which makes it confusing if the creature pops out of it moments later. But
Yeah.
I'm like, you're in an unknown cave and you know that there's a water creature that is on the lurking around after that just put I would avoid walking in the water if I were him. Like you didn't know how deep it
Sounds like I'd
was,
want to
right?
win.
Walk
You
around
never know
it.
when the creature is going to reach out and grab you.
Like, that would be my thought. Like as soon as you stepped in, he could have been like. But another thing that I loved on the same note is when the creature murders Mark. He does. It's
Yep.
like an alligator roll. Did you catch that? Like he grabs him and starts dragging him underwater and rolls him. And I'm like, oh, how cool. Because I didn't really focus on that until recently. And I'm like, that is literally, I think they modeled it purposely after the way an alligator would kill something. And I thought that was super neat.
I did like that. I did like that. I was like, I see what you did there, guys. Well done. Well done.
Yeah. And they keep referencing the Devonian period, which I thought was pretty smart because that was the part where, like, you had like the fish and the plant life and everything diversifying and evolving during that period. And I thought that was really cool that that's what they chose to state. Now I had to look that up. I didn't usually remember the Devonian period.
Yeah.
To be fair. But I did just go to Pleasures of the Cup at the Ohio History Center that was talking about fossils and stuff while handing me alcohol. So, that also probably helped. The things I do with my spare time.
I appreciate that they made the science seem real in the film.
They thought about it and they didn't just phone it in so much. They did actually use terminology that made sense. And, they talked about the rocks and analyzing them. And I thought it was smart. I agree.
Yeah. And finding things in the same strata. Oh, to apply times to when it evolved.
Yeah, he the one the guy who they rented the boat from asks why they're doing what they're doing, and the one guy's like, "Oh, we're going to carbon date these so that we can see what time frame they come from to see if we're in the right strata." And I'm like,
Uranium
that
blend.
is brilliant.
Yeah. Carbon dating is only for like shorter time spans. The uranium dating is
Or
for
uranium dating.
millions. Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, I'm like, that's really well done. Like, you're actually explaining a real scientific method in the middle of this movie that is just a monster. Because usually it's spurious. Like, we know, we've watched enough of these to know that most of the time the science is mostly crap with some mild science in it. But this one was actually pretty sciencey science. They were actually talking science at you, and not in a boring way. Um, like, I liked that it was the guy who captains the ship who would not know what was happening, who asks what's happening, so that then when they explain it, it doesn't feel like a scientist explaining to another scientist how to do their job. It was them explaining to someone.
There's the term science educator, and that's what he was doing in that moment.
Yeah,
And not in a
absolutely.
condescending way. It was very lovely. Like, the
No.
conversation was very fluid and
Let's be honest, in another type of movie, it would have been Kay that they were mansplaining that to. Like, oh, we're gonna go down and get a rock from the strata because you're a plant person. But instead, what they did is they introduced this character well early in. He continues to ask questions, and every time there's a science, like something science he doesn't understand, he asks the question, which there's no reason that a riverboat captain from the Amazon would know any of this.
Yeah.
So it totally makes sense for him to ask those questions, because everybody else on the boat is a scientist and they would never ask those questions. He's playing us in that moment. And I think it was a really brilliant way to do that without them getting super like science preachy.
Exposition. Yeah.
Yeah,
They didn't have to put a lot of exposition dialogue in it because it seemed to flow naturally. Because
absolutely.
yeah, it's like what you said, Betsy. He's the lone, he's the crewman surrounded by a bunch of nerds. So
Yeah.
yeah.
He's
And they
gonna
don't
want
make
to.
him stupid. Like, they make him ignorant in
No.
the sense that he just doesn't know it, but he has the curiosity, he asks, and he clearly understands. And some of it he thinks is silly regardless, and he laughs. And
Right.
it's really well done. They don't really condescend to this character. In fact, if you watch the movie, the character, the captain, kind of condescends to them sometimes, mostly the
He
arrogant
definitely
Mark
does.
character. And I love it. Like, Mark will throw some shit at him, or out there, or try to like posture, and he'd be like, no, it's my boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. The scene near the end where they're trying to leave the lagoon and Mark's like, yeah, no, and the captain pulls a knife on him. He's like, the captain decides where the boat goes. I was like, oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, even the point, like, I think towards the beginning of when they're on the boat, and like Mark makes some comment about like, "Is this the best you can get?" And like the captain's like, "It's a fishing boat, jackass." Like, we want it to be a sweet smelling cruise ship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. At the very beginning of the, and he asks, and the captain asks Kay what she thinks, and she's like, "Oh, no, it's great."
But yeah, the scene you mentioned is one of my favorites because he's just like, "Oh, really? My boat, knife in your throat. You want to keep playing?"
Yeah, I had to kind of like rewatch that because I was it was kind of quick and I wasn't paying enough attention, so I went back and rewatched it. I'm like, oh, I like that part. Oh, because the captain is, for once, he's not the character who's like, oh well, we have to do what this obsessive guy says. No. What if Captain Smith of the Titanic had slowed down instead of listening to Ismay? This captain didn't listen to Ismay. His Ismay.
Right. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could go on forever about like just random little scenes of it, but just generally, I loved the plot of this. I love the science of it. I love the creativity of the creature, the underwater filming, and it was just a feel-good monster movie, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Which makes sense that later on you have Guillermo del Toro coming up with The Shape of Water. Because even at your point, Betsy, where the original creature looks kind of sexy. I don't know if that's the right word,
I
but
was trying not to say he's kind of hot, but he has like, but they gave him like abs, and they gave him like a shape. Like
Mhm.
he's not like amorphous. He looks human enough that you're like,
And somehow
maybe.
there's this empathy feel for him, and so and like in the shape of water, it's taken to the next level where you have a lot more empathy and.
Yeah.
Though I think I feel that one's a little less sexy because he's a little too slender for me, but that's just me. Anyway, but I digress. We don't need to know my weird fetishes, but anyway, that's a whole other monster podcast. But I just I mean it's just it appealed to me as a little girl, it appeals to me as a grown-up woman. Of course I get annoyed by a lot of the sexist crap, but it's a 1950s film and they did better than a lot of others,
Yeah.
like if you have an actual fucking female scientist. Um I don't know, like I just feel like you should watch it, you should appreciate it, you should read about Millicent Park, or Millicent Patrick, sorry. Just it's interesting in what she did and how she survived in Hollywood, and just what women go through in general, especially in Hollywood. It's worth knowing that and knowing that this is here, from the 50s, and this is what women have been held back from. Like there's just so much, but I like it's really, despite having some love for a lot of other stuff like the Mummy and all that, this is really in a lot of ways the dearest to my heart of the Universal monsters. I don't know why, but it is. Maybe it's because the creature's sexy. I don't know, but there you have it. But final thoughts, ladies?
Um, I was going to comment on the creature that he's more innocent is not the right word, but I mean, like Ardith Bay, it the Mummy was driven by obsession. Dracula, blood and killing. The Invisible Man, more killing. The Wolfman, predatory instincts of killing that he couldn't control. And the
Also a little
creature,
creepy too with the way he pursued the
yeah.
girl
But the
even before the
creature,
Wolfman thing.
he wasn't searching out anybody. He was just trying to be left alone. And I think that we can identify with a lot stronger than the other ones. And so I think that's why this creature hits you as more human.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
that's the right phrase. So,
yeah, and you're right. It's easier to sympathize with someone who was minding his own business and then humans invaded his space.
yes.
So even the people that he killed, that he just killed them because they were in his territory. And they had fire and they had human stuff and they were like messing up his environment and he didn't like it. So you can really understand that a little bit more than some of the other Universal monsters. And I think that makes him a more tragic character as well, because if it wasn't for us, he could have lived there forever. Like,
Mhm.
so I think that makes him different in a lot of ways from the other characters. All of them are tragic, but his tragedy is that without us, he would have been absolutely fine.
Mhm.
And that is like kind of heartbreaking and makes it even more of a creature that you feel for and wants to have good things happen. At some points I was like, yeah, just kill them all. It's fine. It's fine. Kill them all. I don't blame you. Do the thing. Get rid
But
of them. Blah.
overall, yeah, but overall, I think for a 1950s monster movie, they did a really good job.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
I will watch it. If you haven't watched it, watch it. Don't get scared away by black and white. We say this all the time. Don't get scared away by black and white. Um, there are fabulous films that are black and white films, and this is one of them. Watch the Nang film. It's amazing. You're not going to miss the color. Just watch it.
I mean, aside from
Also,
you don't quite translate the beauty of the lagoon, but
I was going to say,
use your imagination.
Mhm.
I'm sure it was absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, use your imagination. Watch the stupid movie. It's great.
And with that, thanks for joining us again. And we will see you next month at the start of our Poe extravaganza or Poe extravaganza. I don't know how you want to put that, but it'll be a lot of fun.
Extravaganza.
Going back to some of my earliest horror experiences was reading Poe.
Yeah, me too.
Mhm.
See you next month.
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.